Well, welcome to the Solar Wars. I'll be your guide tonight. Hopefully, with the size of the crowd we have today, it's not going to be as interactive as I'd like it to be. Usually I like to have really interactive discussions. I'll stop along the way and maybe ask three or four, if we want to take 3 or 4 questions what we just talked about and move on from there. At the end, I'm hoping we have a lot of time for more robust Q&A, including what I was asked to talk about too as an economist, is the Trump effect. I think it's on everyone's mind right now. A quick background on me, I have a consulting company called Energy Solutions Partners, ESP. I've done a lot of work in the utility space, smart grid, a lot of software design and utility implementation, solar. I've worked on a lot of microgrids. For the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working with a lot of major utility companies on solar garden concepts, using the microgrid concept for grid stabilization, and also basically just trying to enable more renewables onto the grid, trying to maximize the renewable and solar in particular penetration. My journey started about 10 years ago with solar. My background's energy economics, but 10 years ago I was driving to Vegas. I have a house in Utah, and we have one here in Boulder, so I'm always going back and forth. I do a lot of work in Colorado. My wife is a park ranger at Zion National Park, where we have a house. And I would travel to Vegas a lot. This is 2003, 2004. And I noticed on I-15 for 100 miles, nothing but scrub. And then I would notice the guys spraying pesticides on the weeds for 50 yards in every direction, the right of way on I-15, and then mowing it. And I'm like, it's just baking in the sun. We should be using this. So I bought a book. It was a book about right of way, the managed right of way in our country. And it wasn't about solar, but it gave me the idea of how much right of way do we have. And I wrote an article called Solar Highways. And it basically, we have just in 50% of our managed right-of-way, 700% of all the energy needs using solar. 7 times what we currently consume by using half the managed right-of-way. Now back then, the economics of solar were not what they are today. And we'll go through that on this little journey here. And you can see we're talking about the new administration, the solar panels are sunny, but we have some clouds though too, right? There are some clouds forming. We're not quite sure how cloudy renewables will get in solar, but hopefully I'd like to have some of your input. I've been asking all my colleagues in the financial networks about what their take is on the new administration, so it's all very important and timely right now. This might be a little weird. We're going to go through a very brief, this is another presentation I give to utilities and also consulting companies, the history of electricity. I think it's kind of important to understand what electricity is. I do other courses on describing what electricity is. We're not going to do that tonight. It looks like we have lots of professionals here who know what power is, who know what usage is, kWh, voltage, amps. You probably know a lot of that. But why do we have one of my favorite books up here? Does anyone have an idea why I'm bringing Moby Dick into the presentation? Any content?
They used to use whale oil for heating and light.
What is the utility's main job? What do they always say? We're keeping the lights on. How did they keep the lights on in 1840? Yes, U.S. whale oil. Yes, look at this. This is starting in 1825, and it didn't die until the 1870s. You'll see that 50, 60-year time frame of an enormous industry being built just to keep the lights on at night. Street lights and home lights. This is kind of the formation, in my opinion, of how the electric utility industry started. And we'll also go through how the oil and natural gas and the current utility model, they're in about their 70th year of not really changing their model too much. So this lasted 60, 70. And what we're going to talk about is how innovation and free markets are usually the drivers to remove that monopolistic moat. And not that these guys were forced to do this, but once you have all this infrastructure in place, the ships, the ports, you have this huge industry in place. It's just an industry of scale. It's hard to compete with that. And they didn't need to until they started running out of whales. So we'll go to the next slide. And does anyone know who Samuel is? Considered the godfather, the grandfather of the U.S. oil market. In Pennsylvania, they used to mine for salt. In a lot of places, they dig for salt near rivers, the Latrobe River, the canal, and they would find this seep oil, this crap, and just chuck it into the canals, chuck it into the Latrobe River. Well, one night, the whole river caught on fire. And one smart guy said, wait a minute, maybe we could use that instead of trying to kill all those whales. Plus, the whales are getting hard to get. So, and actually, Samuel was not a scientist, but he actually started the kind of experimenting with cracking, hydrocracking, distilling oil into its distillates, like diesel, kerosene. As a matter of fact, a lot of the first utilities, that was their name, were kerosene and light. So when he started finding out that you can use kerosene, the whales were getting harder to get. This was a lot easier. And this is kind of more the traditional start to what I would say the formation of the modern electric utility. And their main goal is, back then, keeping the lights on. Now it's evolved quite a bit, and we're going to talk about what I would say the first major electric war in our country was. And it happened around the turn of the 19th century, 1900. Does anyone know what that war was? The first major electric war. It involved two main combatants.
New York City AC versus DC.
Yes, the current wars. Thomas Edison came along, and again, innovation, free markets, these are the drivers of economic change. Now, Thomas Edison, I loved his passion. He was an entrepreneur. He loved inventing things, but he liked making money. That was his main goal. He really wanted to make money. And he did invent the first practical light bulb. There were other light bulbs before that. And then he basically built the first generation station, the first power plant in downtown Manhattan. Reciprocating steam engines producing direct current. Can anyone tell me the difference between AC and DC?
Wavelet?
Nope. Okay, direct current just goes one way. Okay, it goes, whew. AC oscillates back and forth. 50 or 60 times, 50 I think in the US, 60 hertz. That's how many.
50 in Europe, 60 here.
Right, it flips back and forth. The oscillation is critical. We'll get to that in a minute. But for Edison's biggest problem was he didn't understand about high voltage DC. They didn't have that. So the DC current that he was producing was very low voltage. And if you have low voltage, you need lots of amps. When you start pushing too many amps, you have lots of line loss. Amps through a resistance, that's what causes heat, and that's what causes line loss. Voltage does no harm. It can just be there. With no amps, it does nothing. There's no watts, no power. So basically, that was his major problem and he started trying to sell individual residency in New York City and businesses his microgrid kit. And he would supply them with power for up to a mile from his station. The problem was people started having wires strung all over the place, and you couldn't see the sky anymore. It was kind of getting a mess. And his other biggest problem was the line loss. And then started the war, the current wars. This was actually quite public. It was at the World's Fair. This went on for quite a while. George Westinghouse was convinced, another inventor, another entrepreneur, convinced alternating current. And here we see the wave, the 50 and 60, whether it's US or Europe, and how it can oscillate back and forth that quickly. And the oscillation became really important. What invention, based on the oscillation, does anyone know that invention that decided? Kind of.
Generators produce AC.
The inductive motor. Nikola Tesla's inductive motor sealed the deal for the war of the currents. Basically, by using the oscillation in a motor, going back and forth, it creates electrical power, usable power to run things, to do work. Okay? This is one of the first major inventions besides just lighting or heating to use energy for. And basically, it only works with AC power. So once he actually licensed this technology to Westinghouse was able to win the deal because then he was able to sell refrigerators, all kinds of devices. They're all based on induction, the inductive motor. And they work really well with obviously a low power factor, a zero power factor. But this is kind of the invention that kind of sealed the deal and ended the war. It was Tesla's patent. And then also, once all the machines started, and again, we could have had a different kind of grid. I've heard talk in Europe, they talked about having a compressed air grid, meaning your refrigerator or all your devices would have little compressed air motors. They would all work on compressed air, not electricity. There are lots of different ways you can do this, but since most of the devices started being sold, worked only with AC, the DC grid was dead. And Thomas Edison wanted distributed generation. He was a big proponent of DG, like we are today. It's kind of coming back into style. Back then, this is the start of kind of the centralized grid model using alternating current. Because just kind of a recap, I mean, basically once we went through the Battle of the Currents in 1935, that was when the Holding Company Act was formed, kind of passed by Congress to facilitate the regulation of electric utilities. So typically, these utilities have been considered natural monopolies. Does anyone know what a natural monopoly is? What do you got?
An industry where it doesn't make sense. It costs so much to build the infrastructure that it would be too economically inefficient to have competition.
Like national highway system. Now, we could have each city build their own little version. Yeah, we don't want to use real good pavement, but the other county can. So it's kind of like a public good. Obviously, the investment needed to build out the country's grid. And I've heard, we have various sections of the U.S. grid. The Western grid, I think I've heard by some considered as one of the largest machines man's ever built. If you look at all the infrastructure, all the gear, it's quite amazing that supply and demand can be handled with such little storage and how well the utilities do it and the industry does it. But anyway, that was kind of the formation. And also after this time is when you saw a lot of municipal utilities form. And they had a hard time, some of them, like Boulder's having today. There were some very large companies and there was kind of a pushback against monopolies. And right now in our country, I forget the exact number, we have between 2,000 and 3,000 municipal utilities all throughout the United States. But most of them were formed in the 1930s and 40s. We haven't had a major municipal utility done in decades. If Boulder does it, and I'm hoping they get it done, it'll be the first major one that I know of, major city, to actually get it done. It's not easy. It's a hard thing. And we have three basic types of utilities today. We have investor-owned utilities. We'll talk a little bit about that. Electric co-ops. And electric co-ops could be like UAMPS in Utah, where they have 60 or 70 cities under the unification of UAMPS, and they manage those 60's electricity. And you have lots of municipal electric utilities. Some of the big ones are SMUD, Sacramento, CPS in San Antonio. So there are some very large cities. And an interesting fact is, and I have a database where if you look at the cost to consumers, the municipal model is 35% cheaper to the ratepayers than the IOU model. In the same territory, their rates are always 30 to 40% cheaper. Why is that? Does anyone know why? Why are munis so much cheaper? We must have an opinion somewhere. It's the economic incentive. So investors, shareholders, want their profits maximized. So the biggest stakeholder for an IOU is to maximize shareholder wealth. And there's only one way to do that if you have a cost-plus regulated monopoly. Cost-plus meaning all your costs, you get 9-10% on top of that, guaranteed. Okay. The best way to keep doing that is every 2 years you go for a new rate case. Utilities consider themselves rate case machines. You can't wait more than 2 years. You get sticker shock. Every 2 years, you pack your FERC accounts, go to the commission, get your money, and move on. With an IOU, they want to keep the rates as high as they possibly can because then they maximize profits. With a municipality, who governs a municipality typically in the United States? Does anyone know? It's a town council, or it's a lot of town councils manage municipal utilities, and a lot of council members are big business owners, and what do the big business owners in the community want? Cheap rates, low rates. Now, everyone wants stability. I mean, that's number one. Okay, you can't afford to have no electricity. I do have this one question. Does anyone know today or yesterday how much are you paying for gasoline at the pump?
$2.
Exactly?
Yes, that's what I paid yesterday.
That's with tax.
Oh, with tax.
No. So anyone else know what they're paying? Most people know within 5 or 10 cents. Okay?
Are you including the military budget?
That costs extra. Now, I'll ask a second question. How much today or the last week are you paying for your electricity? How do you know exactly? Is it daytime rates, nighttime rates, winter rates, summer rates? Which block are you in? Which tier are you in yesterday? You guys are pretty good. When I ask that question, most people just shake their heads and say, I have no idea. I just have it automatically paid. Most people don't even know what a kilowatt hour is or a demand charge. But anyway, most people do not know or understand volumetrically how they're paying for their electricity, which is weird because electric cost and gasoline costs for a family, they're pretty similar. I mean, it goes up and down. When oil was high, you're probably paying more for automotive fuel than electric, but it's interesting that people don't understand or know what they're paying for electricity. Now we get into solar. This is one of my favorite topics. In 2006, I started the Zion Canyon Solar Initiative. My goal was to maximize the solar footprint in southern Utah. It's 110 degrees every day in the summertime. All those houses are baking in the sun. And I was convinced that solar was the answer. Now, back then, the cost, as you can see, was about $4 a watt for a panel. So I went to some solar installers. I finally found one. And can you give me a bid? And I just shook my head and said, I'm not paying that much. There's no way. And he's like, well, it's sun power. They're great. Well, I don't care who it is. I'm not paying, $40,000 for a 7K array or whatever his first bid was. So basically, you can see that the plummeting costs started happening right around here, 2007, 2008, the cost per watt. And I was working with Rocky Mountain Power on Utah's first community solar garden back then. And we progressed pretty well. They couldn't get past the power purchase agreement we wanted to put in place, which would allow the ratepayers, consumers, to have a levelized billing schedule, meaning they wouldn't be paying less than they're paying today, but for their share of the array, they would be levelized for 10 years. They would pay the same rate for 10 years. Rocky Mountain Power said, no, 5 years from now, we're going to have 2 rate increases, and they're going to pay. And I go, well, then what's the incentive for them to buy a share of the solar garden? We need to have something. So since that time, they have come through and they are allowing solar gardens. Matter of fact, the state actually passed a law that made solar gardens illegal. And guess who sponsored that bill? Rocky Mountain Power. Yeah. Interesting. I think they've changed that. A lot of the utilities are starting to engage the solar community a lot better. But the concept of the solar garden didn't go over well at first, but it's starting to catch on in a lot of states. Yes?
What is solar garden?
Okay, so a communal solar garden, I'll give you my example. I was friends with a large landowner. He grazed cattle on the land, did nothing else with it. It was right underneath a high voltage power line from Rocky Mountain Power and close to a substation. So basically, a lot of people can't put solar on their own roof or don't want the cost or the way it looks. But if you can have, instead of putting 12 panels on your roof, what if we put 10,000 panels on the ground where people graze, and then you can buy 12 panels out of the 10,000 panels. And then we'll have meters and a substation there, so we know exactly how much your 12 panels are producing. And so you'll get virtual net metering, meaning you'll get the electricity every day for that array, your share of it. And I had businesses that would obviously pay in. They would pay a lot more. The national park would too. So the basic concept is get all those panels fully subscribed, meaning you need to build your array so everyone will buy you don't want panels that are unbought or unused. And the way it works is you'll have an investor group or the utility can actually own the array, and they also get the tax credit, the 30% investment tax credit. Okay. So it's kind of a way where renters and people who can't put it on their home, we have a lot here. You guys know the CEC, right? The Clean Energy Collective. That's all they do, really, is they do community solar gardens, and we have quite a few of them here in Colorado. So what do you guys think the price per watt is today of solar modules? Anyone know?
40 cents.
I can get Trina for 33. Canadian Solar for 36. It's been dropping like a rock. And it's going to keep dropping. We'll get to that in a minute. So in just like, how many years are we talking about here? It was $4 a watt in 2008. It went to $1 a watt in 2012. I installed a 7K array with an electrician on my house in 2013, and I paid 85 cents a watt for Canadian solar panels. Okay. And since then, it's gone down again and again.
So with this deflationary cost in there, what incentivizes you to buy today versus like, oh, I'll buy it tomorrow?
That's a great point. And actually the industry, the people I talk to in the industry are seeing that happen right now. The cost is plummeted. And we'll get to this, we're racing a little bit ahead, but what happened is there was an issue in China with some of the incentives they were trying to roll out. Their infrastructure couldn't keep up with their demands. They had to pull back a little bit. The ITC issue in America hurt us, meaning a lot of projects were pulled forward and rushed because they thought the investment tax credit was going away. So some of those changes, and then capacity of all these companies, especially in China, kept increasing, so they kept building out bigger and bigger inventories. So now these companies have big inventories. They're still producing lots of panels, and they don't have enough demand. So especially for the larger, like utility scale projects, those are the ones that are stopped right now. They're waiting. And we'll get to that in a minute. Like, just 2 years ago, someone paid 5 cents. Now you're saying for the same kind of array, you're charging only 3 cents in just 2 years? Maybe I'll wait and I'll get it for 1.5 cents. I mean, I think we'll get to an equilibrium. I think at some point, it's like, when do you buy that new laptop? My first laptop cost like $2,000. I mean, do you wait till laptops they pay you to take them, or do you want to use them right away? I don't know. This is kind of I track all the major solar companies, listen to the conference calls because it's a great way to know what's going on. The analysts will ask them what the average selling price is and what their cost trends are. So here you have just a couple of JA Solar. Basically, their blended ASPs are going to be in the high 30s. I think this is just like 2 months ago. Do you guys know anyone know First Solar's Series 6 modules? Everyone hear about those? Okay. Due to a lot of the average selling price declines, First Solar decided to take a $500 million hit. They actually, right now they're doing Series 4 modules. They're smaller and they're very low voltage, but they can produce them thin film panels very cheaply. They had a roadmap to go to Series 5 this year, and then 2 or 3 years go to Series 6. They said, we cannot keep up with all this declining cost. We're going to scrap Series 5. We're going right to 6. And actually, most of the analysts are saying, once they get it going in 2018, their cost per watt is going to be 21 cents. 21 cents a watt. It used to be $4 a watt. And everything else is declining too. The price for inverters are dropping 10, 12% every year. Okay? Now, labor's not dropping, but we're getting better automation all the time. Matter of fact, and we'll get to this soon, here's where you get to the PPAs. These are power purchase agreements. Okay? Typically, these are for larger projects throughout the world. And basically, we'll get to some of the solar battles going on here, but you could see that here's the trend. Here we are in 2009. So this is like 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 7. Now we're below 5. And guess what does anyone know what the lowest PPA is, the lowest bid?
Something like 4 cents.
I think we'll have it coming up soon. Okay, in 2014, this is important, NV Energy, that's Las Vegas. They bought power at 4.6 cents a kilowatt hour. Then they also signed one at 3.8. They got below 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And at this time, a lot of the major casinos in Las Vegas, they were paying NV Energy 15 cents a kilowatt hour. And they use tremendous electricity. And they're going, wait a minute, we want to buy from these guys. And NV Energy said, no, you need to buy from us. We'll get to that battle in a minute. But then look at this one. Jaw dropping 2.42 cents per kilowatt hour, unsubsidized. That means we're below the $1 a watt fully installed barrier. They didn't think we'd get there for another 10 years probably. This project by Jinko, they may have used quite a few of their own panels as well, because they are one of the lowest cost suppliers of silica-based panels. 2 point, I mean, that beats everything. That is, right now, solar is cheaper than wind, coal, natural gas. It is the cheapest form to generate electricity, and it's going down. What's the size of this? I forget. It's obviously a big and obviously buy. It's obviously the insulation rate there is probably as good, if not better, than Las Vegas even. So the economics are always better when you have a rate with a lot of sun, a place with a lot of sun. And and who knows? There may not be much profit here. Jinko may have just been trying to unload some of their inventory we don't know for sure, but everyone we talk to in the industry, the prices are going to go lower than this. It'll stop at zero. Okay, but
Out of curiosity, do you know what the efficiency is of these? Just
Yeah, who cares?
no, no, at this point.
no, yeah, no. So
There is a size factor there that affects the small system.
I think we're doing pretty good on time, but basically what we see is there are two factors for cost decreases: efficiency increases and general cost declines in your factory. What amazes me the most is going from $4 a watt to 21 cents a watt for cost, with really very little technology changes. It's basically mass production over the same fixed cost. The car companies found this out. Okay, we're going to get to batteries. Batteries are going to see the same thing. Once you start mass producing on scale, economically, you see huge cost declines. Now, in this case, they're moving. Most of the panels I installed in my solar projects were 250s, 250 watts. They're starting to phase those out and replace them with 300 watt panels. Same 60 cells, so they weigh the same amount. They weigh 41 pounds. They're about 3 by 5. But so that's a big increase. So when you increase your efficiency, that decreases your cost. So there are two components. Right now, the efficiencies are getting smaller, so most of the cost declines are in productivity gains. So here we go. Most people know the average residential rate is 13 cents a kilowatt hour, approximately. Commercial rates are 10 or 11 cents. And we'll be getting into tariffs pretty soon, but if you can see, if you can buy energy at 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and you're a big commercial entity, and you're paying 10, 11, 15, you kind of like the economics of that. And here's kind of the penetration, this is important, of where solar is being attacked. I talked to a lot of major utilities. I gave a big presentation just like this to CenterPoint Energy, to their executive team. And they just thought, even a year ago, like, well, solar's too expensive. No one does solar in Houston. And I go, well, one reason is, first of all, your insulation's not that great, it's cloudy. Plus, Houston no major installer had moved into Houston yet at that time. So we hadn't seen much load defection yet. So even as executives, they had no idea about any of the trends in solar. So it depends what states you're in. You can see here, the solar wars started in this area: California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. These 4 states. And why is that? All 4 states have higher than average electricity rates, higher than 13 cents, and excellent solar insulation. And now they have solar installers knocking on doors telling people that's the key. If you don't have an installer in your area, it doesn't matter what the cost benefit is. No one will know about it, and then no one will do it. No one, like when I tried to get my first panels done, I had to grab a guy down from Salt Lake. And obviously his bid wasn't going to be very good. He has all his customers up in Salt Lake, and that's changing.
Question?
Yep.
Why do some states, are they so far behind even if they have good solar resources?
Okay, and we'll get to these. And we'll get to a little bit of the Trump effect right now. So there's a lot of worries about regulation, loosening environmental regulation, anti-solar, anti-renewables regulation. But the key to remember is every state in the United States manages their own electricity. The public commissions, each state's like its own country when it comes to rules, regulations, and laws. Same with air quality control in a lot of cases. So each state, and the states are all different. They have different commissions, different ideas how to do things. It's mind-boggling. I kind of like to have more when cross-state stuff with pollution and energy. It seems better to me to manage stuff more federally. But then again, maybe we'll see more innovation this way because every state can do their own thing, and other states can see which states are doing the best thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. So I think that's a good protection for the solar and renewable energy is that states, by the most part, control it and have been controlling it. And if there are federal pushbacks, you bet states will actually push back even harder, like Colorado, California.
So what about like CalISO? ISO is affecting states' PUC's decisions.
It does. There's an interaction, and you're right. We have various. I don't have my grid map out yet, but whoops. So you're talking about the California ISO, and then here's what the PGM's over here somewhere, and here's the SPP. You have different pools that they're nonprofit agencies that manage multiple states, and they're more concerned with keeping the lights, keeping the grid stable. They're not really involved they're not telling Utah how many coal-fired plants they can build. or which ones to decommission. Okay? The state's PUC decides that, along with the utility. But they do have an impact, sure. And this is the last piece. Here's the installation rate of the first battleground of the solar wars. And you can see the reason it's, that this is the area here, right? I mean, like my house is right here in Utah, okay? I did it, I'm paying, the way I did it myself, but I hired an electrician, but I'm paying 5 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm taking block 3 billing, I'm being charged 17 cents a kilowatt hour, and it cost me 5 cents, and I'm levelized for the next 20 years. Only because if that same array in Boulder, you'd be paying 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour probably at that time because you don't have as much sun. And this is kind of the combination of all these effects has made the first battle kicking off with net metering. Does anyone not know what net metering is? It seems like this audience is extremely good. Okay, so the way net metering works is very simple. It's like rollover minutes for Verizon. Like if you don't use up all your phone minutes, you get to roll them over the next day or the next month. Like on my house, I have it, all the data acquired from my solar panels. Typically during the summer, when your solar array on top of your house is producing a lot of electricity, it produces more electricity than the loads in your house can consume. Okay? So the electricity, the physics of electricity, it goes to the vacuum. It's going to go somewhere. So it'll go back out to the grid. It'll go through the utilities meter. They own that meter. Okay? It'll go back to their grid. And full net metering, the concept is they'll give you full retail credits, and you can roll them over next day, next month. Some states, they have a yearly kind of rollover, like in Utah, after a year. If you have too much built up, they just take it for free. I think in Colorado, they give you some money.
2 cents.
2 cents, yeah, but not much. But that's fine. I think people should properly size their arrays. I'm not a firm believer, and we'll go wide. Net metering is no longer going to be an issue within 2 or 3 years. Okay.
Our rec is now 0.5. They changed it about 30 days ago.
Yeah.
2 cents to a half.
Yep. So that's what and this is the first battle. So Rocky Mountain Power started talking about doing something about 3 years ago. California, the utilities in California, SCE, PG&E, they started going to the commission saying we can no longer give you full retail credits. They only want to give wholesale. They're saying we don't want to buy your electricity, and it's not good quality electricity really. It's just your electricity. We can buy electricity for 4 cents. Why should we give you a 15-cent credit? And they have a point there. And this is where I think we're going to have a balance. And I've done a lot of consulting with municipal utilities on how to do net metering. Some municipalities come to me and say, Bill, we're having so much load defection, we're stopping it. We're just not allowing solar installations. They're basically saying you cannot install solar on your own roof because without curtailment control, without being able to control the electricity, you need their permission to install solar on your roof unless you could stop it somehow. So what I told the manager of this utility is, no, don't just kill it. What's a fair price? What would you accept? And he's like, well, I could pay 4 or 5 cents. Well, then offer that. And a lot of his people still went with solar. The economics were so good, even though they were only getting 4 or 5 cents as their rollover minute, so to speak, it didn't kill solar. It was a fair compromise. And I think that's the battle that's going on. The concept is called, what is the value of solar? Some studies have said it's 30 cents a kilowatt hour. Lincoln Electric, who was one of my clients in Nebraska, they came out with a robust study saying it's 4 cents a kilowatt hour, not 30. What's the difference? Anyone know? Some studies have the environmental cost involved, pollution, the cost of pollution. Some just basically have the avoided fuel cost plus some avoided operations and maintenance. So the value of solar for net metering, but I think this battle is going to go away, and we'll see how. Okay, here's 2012. This is when the battle began, mainly because you can see you can see the generation from solar panels just started going ballistic. Before that, utilities were fine with full retail credits for net metering because so few customers were going solar. It was just noise. It was a pittance. But now let's see what's happening. I did a study for a small municipality, okay, 6,000 meters, and basically the average customer bill was about $100. And here you'll see over time, 2013, 14, 15, you can see these are the number of customers that were installing solar. They were starting to see exponential load defection. Customers weren't leaving the grid, they were just using less electricity. And here's the interesting part of the study. The customers that were leaving the grid, this is their average bill, $300-400. So the utility is losing their highest margin customers. It's killing them. This is kind of the beginning of the death spiral. These utilities now will have to raise their rates on everybody else that hasn't gone solar, incentivizing them to go solar. So, and the cost of solar keeps going down. The cost for them to maintain and buy coal and natural gas keeps going up. It is a major, major issue with a lot of utilities that are in areas of the country where solar is very good. Okay, so we'll go on, and you can see this is kind of the percentage of revenue they're losing. And here's the most important thing. With the budgets increasing, their revenue decreasing, now they're projected they're going to have deficits. So they're going to have to go back to their town council and say, we need to raise rates. Okay. Now this is what started, and this is what Rocky Mountain Power, PacifiCorp, and Southern California Edison, they're doing, and I've helped some of these large utilities kind of do software analytics on their data to show them, we can do predictive analytics, and I can predict your next customers to defect. We know that there are like 12 features of a person that goes solar. And the solar installation companies know who to target. Obviously, customers with a high bill, a home that's not too old, flatter roofs, high incomes. You know, they know exactly what kind of customers to target. And it's not, you can predict which customers will defect. And they want to know that because they need to plan. Utilities need to plan 10, 20 years out. When you want to build a new combined cycle natural gas plant, okay, this is a big decision. You need to amortize that thing over 30, 40 years. Okay, so they're having a hard time with CapEx decisions with this load defection. That's kind of one of the reasons for the battle. So the current state of net metering, you know, we have the 3 states that first battled, Nevada, Arizona, California. You know, the PUC in Nevada allowed them to reduce the credit by 75%. California kind of kept the same, except California now is going to charge time of use billing to customers that install solar. They have what's called, does anyone know what the duck curve is? The duck curve, you must know.
Explain it, please.
Okay, so in California especially, they saw so many installations being put on the grid that typically during the day, solar is a perfect peaking feedstock. It peaks when loads peak. In the summer when it's hot, ACs are on, that's when you want solar. So solar is actually, their loads used to get high around 10, 11 and peak. They keep peaking through 1, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Now they're not peaking through noon anymore. They're going down. But guess what happens when everyone comes home at 6? So they gain this weird curve. And it's an issue to deal with. Now, my complaint to them is, okay, you can flatten this duck curve out with one simple change. Just put in time of use pricing, especially to commercial customers. When residents are coming home, commercial entities should be shutting down their electric use. If you have time of use, if you have between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., if you have really high rates for your C&I customers, that curve is gone. They will adapt. They will not use any electricity to avoid that high charge, and therefore it'll be a much flatter curve. But these are issues that Germany faced this issue, Hawaii's faced, any area that's seen a lot of solar installations. California's still not there yet. Colorado isn't. I mean, nationwide, does anyone know what penetration we're at? Is it 1% or 2%? I mean, I always say, people that dislike solar, that's what they go to me, well, if solar's so great, how come it's still 1%? Well, it took coal 80 years to get up to 30%. It'll take a few years for solar to get to 10 and 15, but it'll get there. Okay, the key thing to think about is free market competition innovation is starting to happen at a fantastic rate. And utilities, whether they're munis or IOUs, they do have the same problem. They have to manage the grid. They're very conservative. You don't get, when I work for a utility, you don't get paid to innovate. You get paid to deliver profits and keep the grid stable. Keep your customers happy. I mean, innovation means lower cost to consumers typically, which is not good if you're an investor-owned utility. But now we're seeing just amazing amounts of innovation, especially around smart inverter technology. And what most of the inverter companies tell me is this is why net metering battle is going to go away. They're starting to design their inverters with some DC storage. So when your solar panel is cranking way more energy than you need, okay, you'll have some DC storage with the inverter, Okay, it'll store that extra energy. Then, if you're still producing too much, you'll have curtailment control device, which basically, it's like, it'll be, and that's how the Western grid is separated from the Eastern grid. There's a large transformer that transforms AC to DC. When you transform, it creates a barrier. So if you can make sure that your electricity never hits the utilities meter, maybe you don't even have to notify them when you put solar in your house. Why should you? Do you have to notify utility when you put a new HVAC system in your house? Why should you? Okay, that's why the inverter companies, and this is Tesla, Solar Edge, Enphase, all the innovative inverter companies, they're going to figure a way out to eliminate net metering. Okay, the excess energy you create, you're not going to net it back. You'll just save it to be used at night.
So I was recently told by a solar provider that they cannot install a standalone system because of their agreement with Xcel Energy.
Every state's different. Commercial entities have hit this problem for years. They're called interconnection agreements. I think CU had this problem. They wanted to build a microgrid, or they have built one, but they can't turn it on. So you have to prove to the commissioning utility that no electricity under any circumstance will ever go to the grid. Because if it goes back to the grid could be down, linemen could be working on the grid, they can get injured. The utility companies needs to protect the grid to make the economy work. If the grid goes down, if we don't fund the utilities, that's bad too, that everyone loses. So even though this is a battle, and I totally don't like the idea of not letting customers do stuff inside their premise, as long as it doesn't affect the utility company, they shouldn't have a say. But in some states, they can. They could actually label you as they have a franchise monopoly. They label you as an energy producer, and you're competing with them, even though you're only selling it to yourself. And it's, these monopolies are government enforced. Meaning they can probably put you in jail if you actually try to do it.
Assuming you have the knowledge, is it possible to have your house divided into two panels, one of which runs only off your solar?
Every municipality, state, cities are involved here too. Cities have building codes and they work with the utility companies. These battles are just starting to percolate. The net metering battle was the first. The second one is the tariff battle. Now a tariff is basically, every state has a different tariff. They're basically separate customers between residential, commercial, and industrial. And for years, utilities have issues with industrial customers creating their own electricity because they're so big, they think, well, and they have electricians on staff, and steel plants and cement plants typically have had their own coal burning plant or a 40 megawatt natural gas plant, so that industrial customers negotiate their rates directly with the utility. They have to give them cheap rates or they'll create their own electricity. Commercial and residential customers, it's just typically hasn't been an option to have your own power plant, your own microgrid. It's starting to get more popular, but basically this is the way that the tariff works, and this battle is interesting. Who knows what a demand charge is?
Last company I worked for, the demand charges were higher
Yep.
than kilowatt hour charges
Yep.
because their air conditioner peaked once a day.
Yeah. So electric utilities sell two products. Kilowatt hours and kilowatt. They sell usage and power. Commercial customers pay for the highest 15-minute interval of power. It's not an average, it's an interval. So the meters basically have a high watermark register, and the first 15 minutes comes in, they say, okay, you used 140 kilowatts. The next 15 was 160. They keep track for a monthly billing period. Your highest 15-minute charge is your demand charge. And every utility charge is a little bit different for each state. So this is kind of visually, if you don't know what demand is versus consumption, both customers use 5 gallons. They consume 5 gallons of water. But one went 5 gallons a minute. So this one that went 5 gallons a minute, they'll pay 3 times more for their bill than the one that used, even though they're consuming the same amount of electricity or water, the one that's consuming it at a higher rate will have a much higher bill. And here's how it's evolved over time. So on the left here, we have what utilities had, and I won't give them the name, I don't want to get them ticked off at me. They just 25% of a bill was the demand charge. That was like 10 years ago. Now, 50%. They've learned that if they pack as much as they can into the power charge, that 15-minute average cannot be touched by energy efficiency, demand-side management, or solar. You need something else. Those 3 things will not change the demand charge. Actually, solar will, and I've sub-metered some grocery stores, And we've done studies in the hot desert where if you just put solar panels on top of your plate, top of the plate, it reduces cooling demand by 30%. So if you reduce all demand by 30%, you'll also reduce your demand charge. But solar alone, you have one cloudy day and your store hits the demand charge, that's it for the month. Or if you make a mistake, some towns, they test a new water pump out without closing the other one down. They get put on a new rate schedule, and they can't get off it for another year. So the utilities now want to move demand charges to residential customers. That will basically eliminate the economic value of solar. No one will install solar if you have to pay a demand charge. There's only one way. What's the one way you could avoid the demand charge?
Batteries.
Exactly. That's why I say innovation, and here's a schedule in Colorado. This is what a tariff looks like. So utilities, they're doing analytics. And the company I used to do consulting for, we help them with that. Big data analytics on, if we morph our tariff this way and that way, if we eliminate the top tier billing, which is great for solar, how much less solar? They're trying to push back the solar surge so they can figure out how to deal with this innovation and change. It's hard, but I won't go over this. It's basically complex. The final battleground, grid defection. And this is where I got, about a year ago, I was brought down to Las Vegas. I had written some articles about the battle in Las Vegas. The Economist from the UK brought me down and we filmed a documentary on the solar wars of grid defection. What happened was we went back earlier. Remember those power purchase agreements that NV Energy was buying? The casinos, which are like, one casino is 5% of their load. I mean, that's 5%. I mean, they were paying, some commercial customers I talked to, they're paying over $100 million a year in electricity. I don't know what MGM was paying, but they're like, I don't want to pay 15 cents. I'm going to buy that array in southern Utah. They're only charging 3. And that was the battle. And actually, they won that battle in a way. They had to pay $89 million exit fee in order to buy their own power. And some states have exit fees, some don't. The reason for an exit fee is the concept of stranded cost. If you're a really big data center and you build in a new territory, that utility is going to have to build you a substation. They may have to build out a whole new power plant just for you. And then 5 years later, if you leave, what are they going to do with it? It's a big paperweight.
What's happening in the bacon field?
Right now, it's going to be tough to sell communities on the stranded asset cost for residential customers. It's like, no, I'm sorry. You did not build a coal plant for my house. You did not. Anyway, so just go some of the interviews I had with The Guardian, and that's where I started talking about the death spiral for utilities. If you start losing your large commercial customers to maybe microgrids, storage, or directly buying power from First Solar or Google or Apple, this is happening. Companies want to be sustainable, okay? And they also want cheaper rates. Why not do both? So we saw this earlier. The reason I have it here is this is kind of the reason these MGM, they have a sustainability team, and they have a CFO who wants to pay less. They saw these trends. Once it got down below 4 cents a kilowatt hour for power purchase, they said, I don't care how much of an exit fee we have to pay, the economics still work. They paid $89 million, and the payback period is still going to be less than 6 years. Yeah, so 87 million is what they paid. Wind paid 17. Now Switch started this. There's a large data center. They they wanted to buy their own power. The commission wouldn't let them, and they worked out a deal with NV Energy. Now Switch is suing them because they said they were, I don't know, this won't work. If you're Switch, you couldn't be deceived. You have to have people on staff that know what they're doing. But anyway, so they want to now buy their own power. Now, sustainability is a big factor in corporations, and that's going to really affect this grid defection. Residential customers, we're not going to defect for a while. It's pretty hard. I've looked into it because I wanted to do a test on my own home, just like I put solar. What would it take? Obviously, I would need, and I've actually designed a microgrid for a small town called Fry Canyon. And when you want to be your own grid, it can get real expensive. You need to have battery storage, charge controllers. You need a full-time generator, something that generates, and then you need a backup gen set too, if you want to be truly Rambo. If you want to be Rambo or off-grid, it can be really costly. But you can get close, but getting 100%, I mean, that's the whole renewable concept. You can get to an 80% renewable economy fairly inexpensively, but going that last 20% gets really hard financially. So here's when I pitch to my commercial customers, the 3 ways you can be green. First way, hey, lower pollution footprint. People love to hear that. Hey, look, my grocery store. I'm not producing mercury in the air, no CO2, no NOx, no SOx, no haze. But the sustainability guys love that. The second way of being green is increased cash flow and EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation. The CFO likes that, so you're saving money. The third way of being green is you're going to increase multiple on your EBITDA for your company's valuation because now you have lower future compliance costs. You don't have to worry about, and this is another part of this whole new regulatory environment with the Trump administration, utilities plan years in advance. They're not thrilled that like Trump's going to deregulate, because if they change their procedures, then let's say someone else is president 4 years from now and they put all the regulations back, it's that future compliance risk. That's all the utilities I talk to. They want to move away from coal as soon as they can. They really do. It's this continuous, the fly ash, the air pollution, the cross-state air pollution. It's just this constant worry in the future what's going to happen with compliance. Some utilities can't. They're kind of locked in to coal-fired gen. But they're all looking at ways to move to renewables, natural gas. Once storage gets a little cheaper. So here's a study I did in 2014. I think I presented this to the sustainability team for the National Park Service at Zion. And you can see the cost to generate energy is different based on the feedstock. This is back in 2014, but for diesel, you're paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So that Fry Canyon Ranch microgrid I designed, they were paying $8,000 a month, 100% diesel generated grid. Got them down to $2,000 a month with solar and storage. Okay, but then if they wanted to go 100%, no diesel ever, well then it goes to $15,000 a month. Because you have to have so many solar panels that you just throw in electricity into the ground. You have 3 or 4 days of isolation you got to deal with. So, but these are the various parts that we have here for kind of, and back then, natural gas was still the cheapest, but now just in 2 years it's flipped. The cost of solar and wind both are now below natural gas generation. And that's just on a levelized cost of energy basis, it's even better. Because remember, wind and solar, once you build it and pay for it, you're set. It's fixed for 20 years. The cost of natural gas for 20 years, what's the price of natural gas going to be 15 years from now? I mean, you can estimate, but it's going to be higher. So here are the battery pricing trends. This is the same thing we saw with the module. Remember the module pricing, $4 a watt, now down to 21 cents? I think we're going to see the same thing with battery costs. Now, I don't care which technology wins. I get asked this all the time. What about fuel cells? What about, I don't care. I just want it to be clean, and I want it to be cheap, and I want it to be innovative. So you can see here that in 2017, we're down to $300 a kilowatt hour. But actually, in the recent call, Tesla just announced they're under 190. And they haven't even fully initiated the Gigafactory. It's going to go under 100. Okay, and then for my 7 kilowatt array, I'll get 10 kilowatt hours of Powerwall. And how much is that going to cost me? $1,000. That's like nothing. So I think the trends that we're seeing, I'm trying to make the story for everyone here that we've seen that 80-year cycle of monopoly kind of energy stuff, whether it's utilities, whale oil, the oil industry, natural gas. We're at an inflection point right now. We saw the huge decline in module costs. I think we're going to start to see huge declines in battery cost. Now, this is mainly going to be small commercial and residential. Grid scale, I have no idea what's going to win. I don't care if it's a gravity thing. I don't care if it's moving trains up a hill and let them come back. Pumped hydro. I'd rather not see pumped hydro. I'm not a big fan of calling, damming our rivers. I don't think it's an environmentally friendly thing. But I think we're going to see, does anyone, any questions on batteries, on storage? Because this is the key to net metering. It's the key to the tariff debate. It's also the key to the demand charge. Some of my customers, when I do a load profile their commercial entity, a lot of them only need about 2 or 3 amp hours of storage to shave their demand charge in half. And a lot of my customers, they pay $5,000 a month. $3,500 a month is just the demand charge. The economics of shaving that, and there are battery companies that do it now. STEM is one battery company that's very into demand charge shaving.
What's a flow battery?
Aqueous flow battery from like Aqueon. Basically, an And I think this technology has great, this could be much larger scale commercial. So instead of having a compact, dense energy storage, so this is a big, like refrigerator size thing with salt water and zinc. And I'm not an engineer, I'm an economist, but
You're talking about 2 legs pumping up and then draining.
it's all self-contained. It's all self-contained. It's aqueous.
You use an aqueous electrolyte. I think vanadium is one that
Yep.
you're using in it now. And so instead of just having your electrodes sitting in your electrolyte, you pump big tanks of this electrolyte past your electrodes.
Yep.
You get a large volume of storage.
And the big company that's doing it now is called Aqueon, and they just use salt water. The vanadium flow batteries would be great. They wanted that for the Fry Canyon microgrid because right behind them, the town was formed because of a vanadium mine behind their house. So, hey, there's the vanadium mine that was killing us. Now we can have a vanadium flow battery to have our microgrid.
Have you heard of pump storage using vertical shafts of old coal mines?
Yep. Compressed air, there's all kinds of.
Can you talk a little bit about the units that's an installed cost? Is that right? Then it depends on how you use it also?
The kilowatt hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically with storage, the way you look at it is how many kilowatt hours could you store? So during the day, like my solar system in the summer creates 50 kilowatt hours. I only use 40. I would like to take those extra 10, instead of giving them back to Rocky Mountain Power, store them. So that's the cost. So if I bought a 10 kilowatt system, which is about what I would want for my house, 10 kilowatt hour system, the cost right now would be $2,000 or $3,000.
So you said earlier that utilities are still critical to have in the country. So with all this is one side of the argument. What about the utilities as they're seeing their revenues decrease potentially severely? What would you recommend for them?
This is what I've recommended for them. And
But if they die,
no. We're not going to let the utilities will not die. We're going to have a different model. So we may go to a European model where utilities are taken away from generation. They don't decide generation. That could be community choice, free markets. They just like Centerpoint Energy doesn't generate any electricity. They just get paid to manage the distribution lines and laterals and sublaterals and substations. They operate it, right? So I think we might go to that model. And maybe that's the good thing about having 50 different PUCs is we'll see innovation in different ways. And then we can pick, hey, that's the best model. What I advise the utility companies is to get ahead of the game. Start installing more community solar with levelized billing. You can live with levelized billing. You're not giving the customer cheaper electricity. Over time, they'll save money because they have levelized billing. Because if you sign them up to community solar, they won't go solar themselves because they already have their solar. So get in the game. That's what I tell them. Also, look at how you can actually encourage and engage your customers. Typically, utilities have looked at their customers base as meters or ratepayers. That's it. You're an account. You're a contract account. You're a meter. You're a ratepayer. What this innovation has done is they are reaching out for. They really want to do customer segmentation, customer outreach. They know, and Excel's doing that. You've heard all their commercials. What's they're saying? I forget. They have a great series. Yeah, energy done right, or they're so just
Responsible by nature.
responsible by nature. So no, so they definitely know they need to engage, but the utilities aren't going away. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to kind of tell the story about how innovation is this change agent. It is a little bit difficult right now. That's why we're having these battles with utilities, because they can't innovate. They don't know how to compete. They're seeing this free market competition, and it's not only scary to them, they just don't know how to plan out the next 10, 20 years. So it's getting very difficult. So I don't want to get too political here. I want to be just an economist talking about the various things that may happen. A few people, what were your thoughts about the renewable energy goals and ambitions right after the election? What were you guys feeling? Anyone? Depressed?
So I work for Vestas, and Vestas Corporation has taken the view that since there's a huge emphasis on America First jobs and things like that, that all the U.S. or the majority of the U.S. sales of Vestas units are built here in the U.S., that is the way to approach the administration with the idea that this is built in America.
Right. So we're going to start from the top and go down, but basically you kind of see the three battles, the net metering battle, the tariff battle, changing the tariffs, and the actual battle of grid defection, not letting customers defect. So those are the battles that are going to continue at different stages. Now, I'm interested in how this new administration affects that battle. The first thing I'll say is chaos theory. Now, I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think anyone does. If you try to plan, I do write articles on Seeking Alpha, investment articles, mainly on energy, but all my friends are saying, should I just sell all my solar stocks? Should I buy natural gas or coal stocks? It's, no, do not buy coal stocks. Sorry, no, maybe natural gas, but there is no war on coal. Natural gas has been kicking coal, what, for the last 5 years. So don't buy any coal stocks. But it's going to be chaos theory. I mean, Donald Trump has not presented any kind of real energy plan. He has not really spoken about renewables. Has he made any? I haven't heard him say anything about renewable energy. One thing he will know, like you were just saying, it is the fastest growing segment of American jobs by far. I mean, there's no competition. It employs more people than coal, oil, and gas combined. Okay, all the renewable jobs. And it's not just solar, it's not just wind, it's smart grid technology, it's DSM, it's automated DR, it's everything together, maybe more microgrid technology. This new economy is starting to form and it's creating US-based jobs. So the stuff on the bottom I see as positives that could come out of this. The reds are all negatives. The chaos theory is neutral. It could be anything, right? I mean, and what I do see in what we just talked about, Donald Trump has stated he doesn't like healthcare companies, the drug companies, because there's no competition. He doesn't like companies that are in monopolistic forms. He doesn't like the defense contracting companies because they don't compete price-wise. He likes competition. Do you think he's going to like utilities? I don't think he's going to like that model. He might not even get in that game, and actually he doesn't need to because the states control that. But in general, when I talk to people, both Republicans and Democrats, their view of utilities is not high. I know maybe at eSource you guys do surveys and you know all about this, but a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans, think of it as kind of part of the government that's kind of telling me what to pay. Kind of like the Tea Party. Don't tell me what to pay for taxes on tea. Don't tell me what I should pay for electricity. Don't tell me I can't put solar on my home. So I think it's got solar and renewables and wind have broad support on both sides of the aisle. I do believe that. But it's going to be chaos theory. If they do a tax code change, and they are going to do it, they're going to try to give businesses breaks. They may get rid of the ITC before 2020. That's 30% tax credit. That's a big part of the economics still. That's a negative. Increased access to natural gas drilling is going to be another major negative. Natural gas prices are still cheap. These companies are drilling for oil. They want to frack for oil. They'd rather burn off the gas. The money is, basically on an energy equivalent basis, they get 3 or 4 times more for oil. Okay? So opening up more access to natural gas companies, it just means a lot of natural gas companies have gone bankrupt because they've drilled themselves into bankruptcy. And now, but they want to have more access to drilling. This is going to keep natural gas prices cheaper longer. Natural gas competes directly with solar. It's also a friend as well. Natural gas can be a load-following, rampable feedstock, meaning it can allow wind, it can allow solar. Some of these new turbines they're putting out are 65% thermally efficient, and they can ramp up and down.
Cycle, right?
Combined cycle. They're up to 65. GE was at 60%. I think it's Mitsubishi just came out 65% thermally efficient. A coal plant's 35%. So that means you need to have twice as many joules of energy of coal to get the same output as 1 unit of gas. And gas is already cheaper. It went below $3 an MCF just a couple days ago. And if you look at the future pricing curves, some unis have locked themselves in for 12 years at $4 an MCF. So you can hedge, and utilities are doing it, to lock in cheap natural gas prices. But if we had what I would call natural economics for natural gas prices, natural gas would be twice as high today. And that would be a huge, that means everyone's electric bill in the summertime would be much higher. And what does that do to the economics of solar? Huge upside. So that's a major negative too. The EPA regulations is a negative. The denial of climate change, I like to focus on pollution more than climate. I think it's easier to talk to people across the aisle. People get pollution. stuff you breathe in, haze, NOx, SOx, mercury, fly ash. They understand healthcare, respiratory impacts, healthcare costs. As a country, we don't seem to be together on climate change. It looks like it's getting better, some of the studies I've seen, but we're still pretty much split down the aisle. So I think if we come out and just deny it and don't work with the rest of the world on this, forget about carbon credits, it's going to be a negative for the renewable. But on the positive side, remember, individual states control air quality and utilities. So Colorado, California, if they see the federal government trying to stop renewables, they're just going to step it up. They'll put a tax on gasoline at the pump, take that money, and invest in solar. I mean, who knows? I think the response from individual states may be more positive than a negative from the federal level. I think it's quite possible, but again, it's chaos. It's chaos theory. A big one is going to be cross-state air pollution. This could be a huge positive thing. The EPA has managed this litigious process for years, meaning various states have tried to sue each other over one state building a lot of coal plants, and then they don't get the pollution. The mercury and pollution goes to the next state who's trying to be green, and it's just not right. So they started suing each other. EPA stepped in and said, hey, we'll have regulations that reduce all these pollutions so you don't need to sue each other. I think the floodgates are open now. I think they know the EPA is not going to be the broker anymore. So we're going to have extreme litigation. I don't want to breathe in your dirty coal. Why should I breathe it in? I mean, you can't stop pollution in the water or the air on your state boundaries. So I think that could be, and again, the utility companies I talk to, the big ones especially, they're just sick of this compliance risk of being sued because they're polluting a stream or because they found fly ash in the Price River, or they're just getting sick of all the compliance. And of course, just the natural economic trends, and especially with solar, as we just went through this presentation, natural economics and innovation doesn't stop. It's continuing. And of course, America First concept, I thought for the last 8 years, most people were thinking about America First. I thought we were doing pretty good. I don't know why we have to make ourselves greater again, but that's just me. And again, but I do agree, if there are trade agreements that are not friendly to the US, I mean, there is some, it looks like China does manipulate their currency quite a bit. That's why we have some tariffs in place against solar panels from China. So having more jobs here in America, I mean, I think if that's a big push from the new administration, they're going to love wind. They're going to love solar. Why not? Why would they not? I mean,
Yeah, we do need to move on to get to the Q&A here. We're about done, right?
yeah, I think we're, let me just see.
Wrap up the formal.
Okay, you can see that the clouds have cleared over my house in Utah. The clouds have cleared. Well, there's one cloud out there, but the clouds have cleared. The future looks sunny and bright. I am an optimist. I will warn you right now. I always think very positively. Sometimes that gets me in trouble. But I see sunny skies ahead for the next 4 years. I think we're going to continue to grow and build on the natural economics we've seen, the innovations, all the battles that we're seeing will start to get resolved in different ways in different states. We'll see more innovation. I think it's going to be a little bit of chaos, but in the end, I think it's going to, especially if you're a recent graduate from CU or any college, this is an exciting time to be in energy. I mean, it's going to be very exciting.